I stepped off the plane at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport on a Tuesday afternoon, exhausted down to my bones. 3 weeks in Honolulu sounds like paradise, but I'd spent every one of those days in a hospital room watching my wife of 40 years fight through her second round of chemotherapy. Sarah insisted I go check on my brother while she started radiation treatments. "Danny needs you," she'd said. "I'll be fine for a few days." I should have called him from the airport. I should have texted. But my phone had died somewhere over Nevada. And honestly, I just wanted to get home, plug everything in, and sleep for about 15 hours straight. The Uber dropped me off at my house on Camelback Road around 4 in the afternoon. August heat hit me like a physical force when I opened the car door. Even after 3 decades in Phoenix, that summer blast still took my breath away. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk and noticed Danny's truck in my driveway. That was odd. My brother lived 15 minutes away in Scottsdale, and we'd agreed he'd stay at his own place while I was gone. But maybe he'd stopped by to check on things. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the blessed cool of air conditioning. "Danny?" I called out. "You here?" Nothing. I wheeled my suitcase into the living room and froze. The place looked like someone had torn through it, searching for something. Couch cushions were askew. Cabinet doors hung open in the kitchen. Papers scattered across my desk. My first thought was burglary, but Danny's truck was outside. My second thought was that my brother's Parkinson's had gotten worse, and he'd gotten confused, disoriented. "Danny!" I yelled louder this time, my old firefighter voice carrying through the house. That's when I heard it, a thump, then another, coming from the garage. I rushed through the kitchen to the garage door and grabbed the handle. Locked. I hadn't locked this door in years. It needed a key, and I kept that key in a drawer because who locks their garage door from inside their own house? "Danny? Is that you?" More thumping, definitely coming from the garage. My heart started pounding in a way my doctor wouldn't like. I ran to the drawer, fumbling through old batteries and twist ties until I found the small brass key. My hands shook as I jammed it into the lock. The door swung open, and the smell hit me first. Urine. Sweat. Something else underneath. Something sour and wrong. The garage was dark except for a sliver of sunlight coming through the gap at the bottom of the automatic door. I flipped the light switch. My brother was in the corner, crumpled against the wall next to my workbench. His hands were bound behind his back with zip ties. Duct tape covered his mouth. His eyes, when they found mine, were wild with fear and relief and something else I couldn't name. Jesus Christ, Danny. I was across that garage in 3 steps, ripping the tape from his mouth as gently as I could with shaking hands. He gasped and coughed, and I could see his lips were cracked and bleeding. "Water," he croaked. "Please, Tommy, water." I ran back into the house, grabbed a bottle from the fridge, and rushed back. I held it to his lips while he drank in desperate gulps, water spilling down his chin. His hands were still zip-tied, and I could see deep red marks where he'd been struggling. "Let me get something to cut these." I found my wire cutters on the workbench and carefully snipped through the plastic. The moment his hands were free, they started trembling. The Parkinson's tremor was worse than I'd ever seen it. "How long?" I asked. "How long have you been out here?" "5 days," he whispered. 5 days, Tommy. I thought I was going to die. 5 days. I'd been in Hawaii for 3 weeks, and someone had locked my brother in my garage 5 days ago. My mind couldn't process it. Who did this? Did someone break in? Did you see them? Danny's face crumpled, and I saw tears start to track through the grime on his cheeks. "Michael," he said. "It was Michael." I stared at him. "Michael? Your son, Michael?" He nodded, and the expression on his face was one I'd seen before. As a firefighter, I'd pulled people from burning buildings who wore that same look. The moment they realized someone they loved had left them to die. I called 911. The Phoenix Fire Department arrived first, because of course they did. They're the best in the business. Captain Rodriguez, who I'd worked with for 15 years before I retired, took one look at my brother and called for an immediate transport. Then Phoenix PD showed up, and that's when things got complicated. Detective Lisa Morrison was lead investigator. She was maybe 40, sharp-eyed, with the kind of no-nonsense manner that probably made suspects nervous. She made me nervous, and I hadn't done anything wrong. "Mr. Brennan," she said, pulling out a notebook, "I need you to walk me through exactly what happened when you arrived home." I told her everything. The unlocked front door, the ransacked living room, the locked garage, finding Danny bound and gagged, what he'd said about Michael. "Michael Brennan," she repeated, writing, "That's your nephew?" "My brother's son, 38 years old, lives in Tempe with his wife Ashley." "And your brother said Michael did this to him?" "That's what he said." Detective Morrison looked at the garage, at the zip ties on the floor, at the empty water bottles in the corner where Danny must have been rationing what little he had. "Mr. Brennan, I'm going to be straight with you. This looks like attempted murder. Unlawful imprisonment at minimum, but 5 days without adequate food or water. In August, in a garage? Your brother's lucky to be alive." The words hit me like a punch. Attempted murder. My nephew. Danny's own son. "I need to get to the hospital," I said. "I need to be with my brother. We'll need a full statement from both of you. But yes, go. We'll secure the scene here." I rode in my truck following the ambulance to Banner Desert Medical Center, my mind spinning. Michael. I'd known that kid since he was born. Watched Danny raise him alone after Michael's mother died of breast cancer when the boy was 12. I'd been there for Little League games, high school graduation, his wedding. What the hell had happened? At the hospital, they took Danny straight back to the ER. I paced the waiting room for 2 hours before a doctor came out. Dr. Patel was young, maybe 30, with tired eyes that had probably seen too much. "Mr. Brennan? Your brother is going to be okay, but it was close. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, early signs of kidney failure. Another day or two, and we'd be having a very different conversation. Can I see him? He's sleeping now. We've got him on IV fluids, and we're monitoring his kidney function. He'll need to stay here for at least a few days." Dr. Patel paused. "The police are here. They need to take his statement when he wakes up." I nodded. "I'll wait." It was almost midnight when Danny woke up. Detective Morrison was there, along with a younger officer I didn't catch the name of. I sat in the chair next to Danny's bed while he told his story, and with every word, I felt something cold and hard settling in my chest. Michael had come to my house 3 weeks ago, right after I'd left for Hawaii. He told Danny he needed to talk, said it was important. Danny drove over, and Michael was waiting with zip ties and tape. He forced Danny into the garage at gunpoint. "He had a pistol," Danny said, his voice shaky. I couldn't believe it. My own son pointing a gun at me. "Did he say why?" Detective Morrison asked. Danny's laugh was bitter. "Money. It's always money, isn't it? He said I was living too long. Said he needed his inheritance now, not in 10 years when I finally kicked the bucket. He'd lost everything in some cryptocurrency scheme, owed people money, dangerous people. Michael had forged a power of attorney document weeks earlier," Danny explained. He'd been slowly draining Danny's bank accounts, but that wasn't enough. He needed the house. Danny's house in Scottsdale was worth over $700,000 in Phoenix's current market. "He said he was going to get me to sign over the deed," Danny continued. "Said he'd let me starve in that garage until I agreed. But I wouldn't do it. I told him I'd rather die than give him anything." "So he just left you there?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "He'd come back every day. Bring a little water, a granola bar. Just enough to keep me alive. He kept asking if I was ready to sign. I kept saying no." Danny looked at me with those exhausted, heartbroken eyes. "On day 3, he stopped coming. I thought that was it. I thought he'd decided to let me die and just claim ignorance later." Detective Morrison was writing furiously. "Mr. Brennan, I need to ask you something. Did your son indicate he knew his uncle was returning today?" Danny thought about it. "He knew Tommy was gone for 3 weeks. I think he lost track of the days. He was high on something the last time I saw him. Eyes all wild, talking too fast." The detective stood up. "We're going to bring him in. Do you know where he lives?" Danny gave them the address in Tempe, and I watched the officers leave. I wanted to go with them. I wanted to be there when they put handcuffs on Michael and dragged him away. But I stayed with my brother, because that's what he needed. Danny fell asleep again around 2 in the morning, and I sat there watching him breathe. My phone, finally charged, had 37 missed calls. Most were from Sarah in Hawaii. I called her back, and when she answered, I could hear the fear in her voice. "Tommy? Oh my God, I've been trying to reach you for hours. Is everything okay?" I told her everything. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "I'm coming home," she said. "Sarah, your treatments can wait a few days. My brother-in-law almost died, Tommy. I'm coming home." They arrested Michael at his apartment in Tempe at 4 in the morning. Ashley, his wife, claimed she had no idea what he'd done. Said he'd told her he was taking care of his dad, checking in on him every day. The police didn't believe her, but they couldn't prove she was involved. Not yet. The next morning, I was back at the hospital when Detective Morrison stopped by to give us an update. She pulled me out into the hallway first. "Mr. Brennan, I wanted you to hear this before your brother. We searched Michael's apartment, found the forged POA, financial records showing he'd withdrawn over $120,000 from your brother's accounts over the past 2 months. Wire transfers to offshore accounts, cryptocurrency exchanges, cash withdrawals." My stomach dropped. 120,000? There's more. We found text messages between Michael and a woman named Veronica Cruz. She's his girlfriend. Apparently, Ashley doesn't know about her either. The messages detail the whole plan. Getting the POA, draining the accounts, forcing your brother to sign over the house. They were planning to flee to Mexico once they got the property sold. The property? I felt like I was moving through fog. "You mean Danny's house? And yours?" I stared at her. "What?" The texts mentioned both properties. Apparently, Michael had already forged documents to transfer your house into his name as well. He was just waiting for your brother to sign over his property. Then he was going to file the paperwork for yours while you were in Hawaii. By the time you got back, both houses would legally be his. The world tilted. This wasn't just about Danny. Michael had planned to steal both our homes. My home, where Sarah and I had lived for 28 years, where we'd raised our daughter, where we'd built our life. That's fraud on top of everything else, Detective Morrison continued. Forgery, financial exploitation, identity theft. And given that he left your brother in that garage to die, the DA is considering attempted murder charges. Considering? It's complicated. A good defense attorney could argue he left water, left some food, that he didn't intend for your brother to die. But between you and me, we're pushing for it. What your nephew did was calculated, cruel, and very nearly fatal. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. What happens now? He's being arraigned this afternoon. Bail hearing tomorrow. Your brother will need to testify eventually, and you'll need to give a formal statement about the condition of your property and what you found when you returned. I nodded, numb. I'll do whatever you need. I went back into Danny's room. He was awake, staring at the TV without really watching it. When I sat down, he turned to look at me. They told you, didn't they? About the money? Yeah, Danny, they told me. I'm sorry, Tommy. If I'd been more careful, if I'd noticed what he was doing. Stop, I said. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. But I could see the guilt eating at him, the shame. How do you process the fact that your own child tried to kill you for money? Sarah flew back from Hawaii 2 days later. She walked into that hospital room, took one look at Danny, and burst into tears. Then she hugged him so hard I thought she might hurt him. But Danny hugged her back, and for the first time since I'd found him in that garage, I saw something besides grief in his eyes. You're supposed to be in treatment, he said weakly. I'll go back next week, Sarah said. Right now, you need family. The bail hearing happened on Friday. The judge set bail at $500,000, which Michael's public defender argued was excessive. But the prosecutor, a woman named Catherine Walsh, laid out the evidence methodically. The forgery, the financial fraud, the texts with the girlfriend, the fact that Michael had left his own father bound and gagged in a locked garage in August in Phoenix. Your Honor, Walsh said, this defendant is a flight risk. He has already demonstrated an intent to flee to Mexico. He has a girlfriend we're still trying to locate who was his accomplice in planning this crime. He stole over $120,000, most of which is unaccounted for. And he left his 69-year-old father, who suffers from Parkinson's disease, in conditions that very nearly killed him. I would argue that $500,000 is more than reasonable. The judge agreed. Bail stayed at $500,000. Michael's family didn't have that kind of money. He'd burned through everything. He stayed in jail. Over the next few weeks, more details emerged. Michael hadn't just been draining Danny's accounts. He'd taken out credit cards in Danny's name, forged his signature on loan applications. There was over $200,000 in total fraud, and that was just what the forensic accountants could track. The forged deed for my house was found in Michael's apartment, ready to file. If I'd stayed in Hawaii one more week like Sarah had originally wanted me to, he might have gotten away with it. The title company later told me that once a deed is filed with the county recorder, even if it's fraudulent, it takes months or years to unwind. People have lost their homes that way. Danny was released from the hospital after a week. I brought him to stay at my house, in the guest room where he should have been staying all along. Sarah fussed over him like a mother hen, making sure he ate, monitoring his medications, helping him with his physical therapy. The Parkinson's had gotten worse from the trauma and dehydration, but the doctors said with time and treatment, he'd likely recover most of his function. He didn't talk about Michael much. When he did, it was in this flat, emotionless voice that scared me more than tears would have. It was like something in him had just shut down, the part that knew how to be a father. The trial was set for November. Detective Morrison called me in October to give me an update. They'd found Veronica Cruz, Michael's girlfriend, hiding out in Tucson. She'd agreed to testify against Michael in exchange for reduced charges. The text messages alone were damning, but her testimony would seal it. She says it was all Michael's idea, Morrison told me, that she just went along with it. But the texts show she was actively planning how to spend the money. They had it all mapped out. New identities, a condo in Cabo San Lucas, the whole fantasy. Do you believe her? I asked. That it was all Michael? Morrison was quiet for a moment. I think Michael was the driving force, yes. But I also think she knew exactly what she was signing up for. You don't plan to steal 2 houses and flee the country without understanding what you're doing. Catherine Walsh, the prosecutor, called me in for a meeting before the trial. She wanted to prepare me for what was coming. Defense is going to argue diminished capacity, she said. They'll say Michael was addicted to drugs, not thinking clearly, that he never intended for his father to die. They'll paint him as a desperate man who made terrible choices, but isn't a murderer. He left Danny in that garage for 5 days, I said. In August, in Phoenix. How is that not attempted murder? Walsh nodded. It should be, but juries are unpredictable, especially when it's family. Some people can't wrap their minds around a son trying to kill his father. They look for explanations, justifications. Our job is to show them the premeditation, the planning, the forged documents that were prepared weeks in advance, the girlfriend, the offshore accounts. This wasn't a desperate act. This was calculated. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I sat through every day of it. Sarah on one side of me, Danny on the other. Michael wouldn't look at us. He sat at the defense table in a suit his public defender had probably bought for him, staring at his hands while witness after witness testified. Detective Morrison, Dr. Patel from the hospital, the forensic accountant who'd tracked the stolen money, the title company representative who explained how close Michael had come to stealing both houses, and Veronica Cruz, who cried on the stand while describing how Michael had told her his father wouldn't even miss the money because he'd be dead soon anyway. Danny's testimony was the hardest to watch. The defense attorney, a young guy named Robert Chen who was just doing his job, tried to poke holes in his story. Suggested maybe Danny had confused things, that the Parkinson's affected his memory, that maybe Michael had been trying to help and things just got out of hand. Mr. Brennan, Chen said gently, isn't it true that your Parkinson's has progressed significantly in the past year? Yes, Danny said. And you sometimes have difficulty with memory, with time perception? Sometimes. But I remember those 5 days perfectly. I remember every single hour. Your son loved you, didn't he? He wouldn't want to hurt you. Danny's voice was steady when he answered. I thought he loved me. I was wrong. The prosecution rested after 2 weeks. The defense called Michael's high school counselor, who testified that he'd been a good kid, called his ex-wife Ashley, who sobbed and said she couldn't believe he'd do something like this. Called a psychologist, who said Michael showed signs of addiction and poor impulse control. None of it mattered. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, Michael still wouldn't look up. The foreman stood and read the verdicts. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, kidnapping, elder abuse, fraud, forgery, financial exploitation. The list went on. I felt Danny's hand grip mine, his tremor worse than ever. Sarah was crying quietly on my other side. I wasn't sure what I felt. Relief, maybe, but no satisfaction, no sense of justice. Just this hollow, aching sadness for what used to be. Sentencing happened 3 weeks later. Catherine Walsh argued for the maximum. She brought photos of Danny in the hospital, gaunt and dehydrated, showed the jury the zip ties with his blood on them, played the 911 call where I'd found him. This defendant, Walsh said, betrayed every bond of trust and family. He systematically stole from his father, forged legal documents, and when that wasn't enough, he locked him in a garage and left him to die. He only miscalculated by a day or two. His uncle's early return saved his father's life. Without that, we'd be trying a murder case. Chen, the defense attorney, argued for leniency, said Michael needed treatment, not just punishment. That he'd lost everything, his marriage, his freedom, his family. That he was sorry, truly sorry, for what he'd done. Michael stood up when the judge asked if he wanted to speak. He looked at Danny for the first time since the trial began. "Dad," he said, and his voice cracked. "I don't know what happened to me. I don't know how I became this person. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything, but I am. I'm sorry." Danny didn't respond, didn't move, just stared at his son with those flat, dead eyes. Judge Maria Santos had been on the bench for 20 years. She'd seen everything. But even she looked shaken when she delivered the sentence. "Mr. Brennan," she said, "what you did to your father is beyond comprehension. You didn't just steal his money. You stole his dignity, his sense of safety, very nearly his life. You betrayed every bond that should exist between a parent and child. The court finds no mitigating circumstances sufficient to warrant leniency. On the charge of attempted murder, you are sentenced to 20 years in prison. On the charges of kidnapping, elder abuse, and financial exploitation, you are sentenced to an additional 15 years to run consecutively. Total sentence, 35 years in the Arizona Department of Corrections. 35 years. Michael would be 73 when he got out, older than Danny was now. The bailiffs took him away, and this time he looked back. Not at Danny, but at me. I don't know what he was looking for. Forgiveness, maybe? Understanding? He didn't get it. The money was harder to recover than you'd think. The offshore accounts were frozen, but getting the money back required international lawyers and paperwork that would take years. The credit cards in Danny's name had to be disputed, one by one. The life insurance policies Michael had taken out on Danny were fraudulent and had to be canceled. The forensic accountant estimated we'd recover maybe 60 cents on the dollar, if we were lucky. The house was safe, at least. The forged deed was voided, but it meant months of legal work to clear the title. Danny's house in Scottsdale was put in a trust, with me as trustee. He didn't have the energy to fight it. Sarah finished her cancer treatments in January. Clear scans, the doctor said. Remission. We celebrated quietly, just the three of us in my living room, because Danny didn't want to go out much anymore. He sees a therapist twice a week. Dr. Martinez specializes in trauma and elder abuse. She says Danny has PTSD, which makes sense. He has nightmares about the garage. Sometimes I wake up at 3 in the morning and find him sitting in the living room with all the lights on, just to prove to himself he's not locked in the dark. We don't talk about Michael. Danny's other two kids, Michael's younger brother and sister, cut off all contact with their brother. They visit Danny every weekend, trying to make up for what happened. It's not their fault, but they feel guilty anyway. That's family. I retired from the fire department 5 years before all this happened, but I stayed in touch with the guys. Captain sentence. Tommy, he said, I've been thinking about your case, about what happened to Danny. We get called out to elder abuse situations more than you'd think. Sometimes we're too late. Yeah, he said. I want to start a training program. Teach first responders what to look for. The signs of financial exploitation, neglect, abuse. Would you and your brother be willing to help? Maybe talk to some recruits? Share your story? I asked Danny about it. He thought about it for a long time before answering. If it helps someone else, he finally said, then maybe it means something. Maybe it wasn't all for nothing. We've done 3 presentations so far. It's hard, listening to Danny tell the story over and over. But I've seen the way those young firefighters and paramedics listen. The way they take notes. The questions they ask. How do we spot a forged POA? What are the red flags for financial exploitation? What do we do if we suspect a family member is the abuser? We're giving them tools. Knowledge. The ability to save someone like Danny before it's too late. Last month, Detective Morrison called with news. Veronica Cruz, despite her testimony against Michael, got 5 years for conspiracy and fraud. She'd served maybe 3 with good behavior. It didn't seem like enough, but Walsh told me that's how plea deals work. You take what you can get. I visit my mother's grave sometimes, out at Green Acres Cemetery. She died 10 years ago, and my father 5 years before that. I kneel there in the grass and tell her what happened. Tell her about Michael, about Danny, about everything that went wrong. I think about how lucky I am that my parents died before they had to see their grandson. Danny's getting better, slowly. The Parkinson's is manageable with medication. The nightmares are less frequent. He laughs sometimes now, usually at something stupid on TV. It's not the same laugh as before, but it's something. Sarah asked him once, a few months ago, if he forgave Michael. No, Danny said. I don't think I ever will, but I'm trying to forgive myself. For what? Sarah asked. For not seeing it coming. For being the kind of father who raised a son capable of that. I wanted to tell him that wasn't his fault, that Michael made his own choices, but Danny knew that already. Sometimes, knowing something intellectually doesn't help when your heart still bleeds. I'm 64 now. Danny's 69. We don't know how much time we have left. The Parkinson's will get worse. Sarah's cancer could come back. Age catches all of us eventually. But we've learned something from this nightmare. We've learned that family isn't just blood, it's choice. It's showing up. It's sitting in hospital rooms and driving to therapy appointments and making sure the people you love know they're not alone. Michael will be in prison for decades. Maybe he'll find redemption there. Maybe he'll become a different person. I don't know if I care anymore. I used to think justice was about punishment, about making people pay for what they did. But now I think justice is simpler than that. Justice is Danny sleeping through the night without nightmares. Justice is Sarah's clear cancer scan. Justice is sitting on my back porch in the evening, watching the sunset over the desert and knowing that the people I love are safe. That's the only justice that matters anymore. The rest is just noise. Sometimes Danny and I sit out there together, not talking, just existing in the same space. And I think about that garage, about how close I came to losing him, about how one more week in Hawaii would have meant planning a funeral instead of a trial, about all the tiny moments and decisions that add up to a life, or a death, or something in between. I don't have a neat ending to this story. Real life doesn't work that way. Michael is in prison, Danny is healing, Sarah is healthy, and I'm here, grateful for every ordinary day, grateful that I came home when I did, grateful that I found him in time. That's all any of us can ask for, really. To find each other in time, to not be too late, to save the people we love before the darkness takes them. I found my brother in time. That has to be enough.